Nice to see
Hi,
you.
good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody. So I'm actually in a clinic right now where we're going to be doing vaccinating as soon as I'm done speaking to everybody.
So I didn't introduce you, but you can introduce yourself. Scott Phelps, professor of. Yeah, so it's complicated. Yeah, do you want to try yourself?
So for the past 20 years, I've actually been going between positions where I'm a professor and then I worked in operations. I've been the EMS director for the state of New Jersey. I've been the assistant commissioner of public health for the city of New York, mostly dealing with either ambulances or disasters. And so anything from 2003 with sudden acute respiratory syndrome all the way through the current past 2 years of COVID-19, I've been involved with that. And this is just some of the my thoughts over time with things that we can improve and things that we probably need to change. So right now, for the past 2 years with COVID, we've gone from being able to do simple things like distribute masks to being able to give vaccines for the past year or so, to now where we're administering monoclonal antibodies, and also right on the future right now, giving out oral antiviral therapies, which is going to probably start happening in another week or two. And so I've been involved with all of this at every level, from literally giving flu injections or giving COVID booster shots, which is what I'll be doing today, all the way through making executive decisions about how the policy is going to function. And some of the things that I've learned, I just wanted to talk about because I thought that they were both important and interesting. And, you know, everybody talks about after action reports, but this is like 20 years of after action reports. These are things we haven't learned and that we haven't gotten any better at in 20 years, apparently. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was using a franchise model versus the mom and pop model. And what I mean by that is, do we have either a regional or a national or a global model for how to best run things like vaccine clinics, where I am today, where the setup is the same and the marketing materials are the same and the checklists are the same. And what I've found over time is that we spend an awful lot of time focusing.
Scott, we have
I see it there.
Presentation, yeah. So
you can just go to the McDonald's slide. That's where I'm at. What you'll see is that we have reached the stage where people have figured it out over the past 2 years, but we're still in a position where we have to reinvent the wheel every time. And we should actually have enough experience with this now where it's a single product that's consistent everywhere. If you get a vaccine in the state that I'm in, we can look it up and see when and where you got it. But if you've got a vaccine in a different state within the United States, we can't see it. So we don't have a single national database. We don't have a single national marketing materials that should be up and outside the senior center where we are right now today. We don't have a single national website or even a state level. We have a state level website to register for these vaccines, but there's no national system where it's all going to be seamless for the customer. And that's one of the reasons why I was thinking about fast food versus crisis response, because McDonald's represents a number of things. And if you click back on the McDonald's arches there, there's a number of things that McDonald's represents. They represent a consistent product, a consistent price, and a consistent experience. And yet, when we are giving vaccine clinics around the country and around the world, the customers typically don't have that. The patients don't get that same experience no matter where they are. And one of the reasons that is a little disappointing is that if you go to the next slide with the hamburgers on it.
Next slide.
Yep. You'll see that the one of the things that McDonald's has is that they're consistently trying to innovate their products. So fast food restaurants have similar products that they adapt to form a new product. If you just jump to the next slide, you'll see about 10 different kinds of hamburger and fish sandwich, and maybe even mutton sandwiches, vegan sandwiches. But it's all basically a similar product. It's bread, vegetables, meat, and some kind of sauce. In contrast, though, what we've been experiencing, at least for the past 2 years, has been a gradual shift where we haven't found synergies between the things that we're doing. So with mask distribution, that's pretty straightforward. But when we shifted to testing, that had a different set of requirements. You could see in the next slide, the person is wearing PPE, and we had to do very deep nasal swab testing, which was very uncomfortable. Then we shifted to vaccination, which was not actually all that different from a process than the nasal swabbing. And now we're at the point where we're doing distribution of kits in the next slide. And then finally, we're giving monoclonal antibody therapy, which is more intensive and more dramatic than giving out the kits. So there are some similarities. However, we're not sort of leveraging the similarities, even when faced with the huge number of differences. If you jump forward 3 slides, we also don't have a good track record of adopting to the local environment while still maintaining a single customer's experience. One of the things that is interesting about McDonald's in particular is that you can go to different parts in the world and you will get different products. So in India, they have chicken and vegetarian burgers. If you go to Australia, they'll have a mutton burger, which we don't have in the United States. I don't think you have that in Turkey either.
Turkey's kofta burger.
Just turkey burger, but no mutton burger.
Kofta burger.
Kofta burger, even better.
Yeah.
But they don't have beetroot on it like they do in Australia.
No.
So even though McDonald's adopts to local tastes and local standards, the customer experience and the product is pretty much exactly the same. And that's what we really don't have with vaccination and preparing for different types of medical crisis. We have to figure out how to make it more convenient for the customer. I mean, it's 8:00 in the morning right now, and we'll be here until 2:00 this afternoon, but we will not be here at 6 p.m. when people get off work. And that's because the people in state government work from regular business hours, and most people who are involved in this process think about it from how do they schedule these services during their normal work days, rather than how do we schedule these things to make them the most convenient thing for the people who actually need our services and care. Where one of the problems that we've seen more recently is the divide between analog and digital. And that divide isn't just for the patients, because the patients, some people are older and don't have smartphones, and it's mostly older people who don't have smartphones, or people who don't bring their smartphone with them to the clinic. And right now, with the testing kits, we're making them scan a QR code. And we've realized a number of things. One is that if you have an iPhone, it's really easy because the QR scanner is built into the photo app. But with an Android phone, which is what I have, it's not. And so if we have someone with an Android phone that doesn't have a QR code scanner, they have to download another app to be able to scan that QR code effectively. It can be done. It's not super hard, but it's another thing that takes more time, which slows down the processing of patients. There are also other problems with government not being digitalized. So there are times when we can capture information digitally, but then we have to transcribe it into an analog fashion to be able to actually fulfill the requirements of the state. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that you would think technology that the state would be more streamlined, but a lot of times the state still really requires things to be on paper. One of the apps which I think many people have found super useful is an app called Jot, which allows you to create your own forms and capture data. And every time I've seen, probably 3 or 4 times in the past 2 years, for a variety of different purposes, people using Jot forms has been a really good solution because it's simple, it's quick, and it allows distribution of questionnaires or data collection instruments, however you want to think about it, for a variety of different reasons. Using tablets is good, and that allows capture of data pretty quickly. But probably the most important thing, right now I'm in a state that has a lot of ski resorts, and there's a lot of people whose English is not their first language who work at these ski resorts. Mostly Spanish, but people from as far away as Bali in Indonesia. And with a smartphone, it's much easier to translate information and questionnaires into somebody's native language. Whereas if you have a paper form, unless you're really thinking about it ahead of time, you're not actually going to have it at hand. One of the things that I've also found over time is that when people want information, a lot of these vaccination campaigns are being led by people from government who do vaccines during normal times. And they have an insatiable appetite for data, and they have a very clear idea about how the process should be, but they don't bear any of the costs. So back earlier in my career, in 2001, when we were worried about outbreaks of smallpox, I spent a lot of time debating with the vaccination people about how much data we needed to collect and how long people needed to wait. Because I was given the task of having a plan to vaccinate all 10 million New Yorkers within 4 days. And the only way we could do this was to eliminate every single process barrier we could. But the problem is that the vaccine people were so used to their normal process, there was constant pushback. And unless someone gave, we weren't going to be able to accomplish the goal of vaccinating 10 million folks in 4 days. It just wasn't going to happen. So we had to sort of come to a conclusion that eliminating unnecessary data points is crucial to being able to be efficient. And that sort of led me to there's a number of downstream things that flow from that. One is that government is not necessarily super efficient at doing things. If you go onto the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, you will see that every fast food chain has an app where you can actually download the app and make your purchase and pay for your purchase, and it's basically seamless. In contrast, when the United States opened their insurance, our national sort of insurance model, which happened maybe about a decade ago under President Obama, they spent over $1 billion just to design the single website. That was not for any of the operations. That was $1 billion for the website. And it gives you real question about whether government can actually, do this without actually bankrupting us first. So I think that there's definitely more of a role for the private sector in helping these things happen quickly and somewhat efficiently. And we have to start figuring out how to leverage what the private sector has done, and be able to figure out how we can do something similar. So there's 2 examples. One is in the lines, and you could see when COVID happened, there's a fast food restaurant called Chick-fil-A, which didn't close. They just closed from you being able to walk into the store, but their drive-through never stopped. And in fact, they doubled and tripled their drive-through, and they will put thousands of cars a day through their drive-through because they realized that in order to stay in business, they needed to get significantly more efficient. In contrast, you see the giant traffic jam in Los Angeles, where they had the COVID vaccinations in California, where it was not locally based, not efficient, and people were literally waiting in line for hours and hours. Now, in every community, pretty much every community, we have other examples of drive-through services, like banking, for example, right here in this picture. But we don't leverage the drive-through processes that we already have. We don't leverage the drive-through fast food restaurants. We don't leverage the drive-through banks. We don't leverage any other drive-through services in order to help deliver these necessary services quickly and efficiently. And that's one of the things we could actually do much better through public-private partnerships to make things a little bit more efficient for everybody. And because we want to get people, we want to be able to, if we have to give a vaccination out, we have to give it out rapidly. This gives us the opportunity to leverage existing processes where people know how to go through a drive-through banking environment. People know how to go through a drive-through fast food environment, and we could process people much more quickly using their apps and using their already existing physical layout. So 10 of the 10 takeaways I thought that were interesting over the course of my career. One is that we're going to be doing this over and over again. And if we're going to be doing it over and over again, we really should actually learn and develop some standardization with local customization. But there should be a brand that has a consistent product, flow, design, customer experience, data requirements, and all that information should be transferable. So if someone gets their first vaccination in California, it should be easy for them to get their second vaccination in Vermont or New Jersey and be able to do it without having any questions about whether it's going to be transferable. We may need to change what we do, but we should be looking for synergies to make sure that the system, we learn from what we did before. We have if we're going to have clinics, we should have them in the same places so customers know where to go. We should have synergy between things that we do, if possible, so that we can actually make it a more sensible flow for the customer. We need to be customer focused, time and location. We need to go where they're at and when they're available. Most people work from 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. So we need to be able to give them the services they need on weekends and from 6 to 10 in the morning and maybe even at breakfast time before they get to work so that they can still continue with their life and we can still get them what they need. We need to think about what data is needed versus what people want. And we need to start being more laser focused about eliminating things that don't actually either improve care or improve the customer experience so that people can actually get through long lines relatively quickly. Because each question, even if it only seems to add 10 seconds to someone filling out a form, is going to take 6 seconds or 3 seconds times 10 million people actually sometimes obviously becomes a real time suck, which is going to not allow us to get the mission done that we're trying to get done. Throughput is sometimes can be more important than safety. Right now, when we give someone monoclonal antibody therapy, we make them wait for an hour, which seems like a very long time. If they're going to have an allergic reaction, they're going to have it much quicker than that. But that's the standard, and no one is under strong pressure to change it, even though it detracts from the customer experience. It probably doesn't actually improve safety that much, and it just slows everything down. That's actually one of those issues that seems to be recurring across the past 20 years more often than not, that sometimes we have to give up one for the other. Mobile apps do help streamline the process in the state where I'm working right now. They have an online registration format, even though when you come to the clinic, it makes you enter all the same data again for no particular reason that I can tell. In theory, it could actually make the process much quicker. I have some fast food apps on my mobile phone. They have my credit card information, so I can spend about 4 or 5 clicks and order my food 1, 2, 3 without any more information required. We should have something like that because it would actually make everything quicker. We need to learn and leverage other businesses. If people have drive-throughs, they already have the existing physical layout, which is hard to replicate. The more you see clinics set up where people are putting out cones, you realize that the drive-through at the bank and the drive-through at the fast food restaurant, because they've been designed for that, are actually way more efficient because the customers know how to behave. Customers don't know how to behave around cones. And finally, government, at least government in the United States, may not be the best groups to manage these kinds of products. Government is slow, it's expensive, and it doesn't necessarily develop solutions that are the most elegant on the first, second, third, fifth, or even the 10th try. So that's what I've learned in 20 years. And I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have.